Welcome to the Learning and Development Podcast, sponsored by Infopro Learning. I'm your host, Nolan Hout, and joining me today we have Theresa Zeller. Theresa has spent over 35 years in the learning and development space, much of that with different roles at Merck, where most recently was the global head of learning and creation before she officially retired to pursue other passion projects. Today, we're going to be talking about how we help people perform at their best. Because after all, that's the whole intent of what we do in learning and development, isn't it? I'm really excited to start this podcast off today. So with that, let's meet our guest, Theresa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Nolan. Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I feel honored to have you here. I feel like we've crossed paths at 1,000 different conferences, 1,000 different times. So glad we officially got the chance to meet. Before we, get started into the topic that we have, which is how are we going to help people perform at their best, I wanted to just start with tell us a little bit about yourself. You've obviously had a very long and successful career. Where did it all start? I mean, did you always know this was the field you wanted to be in and you just kind of kept at it? You had an ambition of being a CLO kind of role at Merck. How did it start?
Yeah, no, great question. So, interestingly, it started the last semester of my senior year in college. So, I was an
Okay.
industrial organizational psych major, honestly, ready to graduate, had no idea what I was going to do. My last semester, I had a course called Training in Business.
Okay.
And it just all clicked. I also had a communication minor, so like everything just came together. And think what it spurred in me was a passion around how can you actually help people to do something better, perform better,
Yeah.
to achieve their goals, to achieve business goals. I loved it so much. I stayed on. I did research with the professor, and I co-taught his class with him, or I TA'd his class with him.
All right.
And then I went to grad school for learning and development. And so
Okay.
I'm probably one of the few people that I know that have stayed in the same career my entire, now close to 40 years.
Yeah. What's really fascinating is I I remember when I got into the space about 13 years ago, and in marketing, we started producing a lot of content on, corporate training, this, that, and the other. And we'd have these institutions come to us and be like USC, I remember was one, like, hey, we're having a post grad on instructional design. And so we started looking, but it's not like, I mean, 15 years ago, there wasn't that many of those out there. So I doubt, and when you went, which was a little bit earlier than that as well, I mean, it must have been a pioneering field, it seems like, at that time.
It really was. And in fact, I needed to take a lot of courses out of the School of Education, the School of Psychology, the School of Business, the School of Communication. But I was down at University of Maryland was the master's program. And I will tell you, it was a pretty new field.
Yeah.
Um, and one that I still think is yet for folks broadly to see the value in learning and development. And I think
Mm.
it's still coming into where we're really getting teed up to show where we can add the most value, if you will, in organizations.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. So, I mean, you mentioned, so let's just elaborate, right? We're saying now more than ever, we've got the ability to make an impact on the performance of the person, which then begets the performance on the org. Tell us a little bit about how you envision that and why now is kind of the time.
Yeah, I think now's the time because, I've been heralding this for a couple of years now. And I think we're finally seeing AI coming in enough into the space
Hmm.
that I think you're really starting to see that truly the half-life of skills is at best 3 years now. Where when I
Yeah.
came into the space, you would teach folks a skill and they'd do that for a good 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, they'd grow and they'd enhance and they'd become more proficient. But essentially, they just kept getting better at a similar skill.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing that folks to be successful, to have successful careers, to survive, are needing to reinvent and reskill themselves on much shorter turns. And in order to do that, you really need learning and development to help guide them as to how to do that effectively. like a great analogy is you can't be a professional athlete and just pick up a book on running. You're not going to win the Olympics by reading a book. You actually have to practice. You actually need a coach. There are things that go into skill enhancement, and there's real science behind it that I think we undervalue oftentimes.
You know what? You're so true. And I was talking to somebody. So I grew up in a very sports heavy family, and so you would think, I'm the dad on the sideline who's like yelling at the rest, or the coach that's, I couldn't be further from the truth, or further from that person. And I was saying, it's unfortunate that there's a lot of, so I'll take, my son's in flag football. There's a lot of football coaches that just don't understand football because they've never played football. And there's a big difference between never having played it and trying to coach it based off of what you see on TV. I feel like the same thing happens with learning. Is they're like, well, gosh, I've taught a seminar, or I've presented an hour in front of my executive team, or I've helped our L&D leaders do whatever. Yes, you have, but the difference is so wide, so for whatever reason, we have these blinders on us. But it's funny. I was actually just thinking that you undervalue the skill.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So
think
that so,
I
so
think
as we
it's part
have
of
this coach, like you said,
it.
and I agree. Now is the time. You mentioned that the half life um, of skills, and the need to help understand what are those skills. And I also think the other part that makes L&D kind of important, aside from having that knowledge, of how to do it, I think the second part is L&D is in such a really tough role where you touch every person in the organization.
Yeah,
And just think of that. You are the person. So in today's day, also when we're talking about skills, one of the big asks is, how do I take a marketer who's really good at this skill, but maybe is looking to leave because they're more interested in this role? How do we help for lateral transfers? How do we create a skills marketplace within a company? The head of marketing doesn't know what ops does, doesn't know what finance does. It's L&D is kind of that central hub, the United Nations, that is kind of a third party in this whole thing, that's saying, let me help kind of broaden our skill set overall and flatten this org, so that as everybody kind of goes up, um, the value of the org goes up, because we're now all picking and pooling from resources, but our investment in these resources have gone
yeah,
up.
I agree. It's interesting because I think every company I've been in, every company I've worked with or had conversations with peers, or,
Yeah.
you always hear, we value our people, our investment is in our people. And yet, let's be really clear. One of the first budgets that gets cut is learning
Training
and
and travel.
development, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes the last dollar that gets doled out is to
Yeah.
learn development. Now, that's not always the case. I have had some amazing, amazing sponsors, some business leaders who truly understood what you and I are talking about,
Yeah.
that in order for me to achieve what I need to achieve, I've got to have people that are ready when I need them to be ready. And that's a lot faster than they're going
Totally.
to naturally get there.
Totally.
And so to me, the key has always been, yeah, you you can people can learn from online courses, they can learn from reading a book, they can learn from observation and from just sheer determination. The question is, how long does that take?
Yeah.
Right?
True.
And instead, what a learning and development professional can do is help an organization to accelerate that time to
Yeah.
competence, which, especially now, is going to be worth more than any of the investment that they will ever make. Um,
Yeah.
and so I really think that's really the secret behind learning and development, is that acceleration piece
Hmm.
versus, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools out there for people to learn things. Um, the question is, how do you accelerate that performance such that you're driving meaningful value in the organization much more quickly and much
Yeah.
more quickly than your competitor?
Yeah. And to steal a quote that you said to me before this, and you mentioned it, traditionally L&D is getting the last dollar. What if instead you got to spend the first dollar? And the odd thing is that I think most executives agree. If you look at, obviously, they're not saying it just to say it. I think they actually do when they have the time to sit down and think strategically, right? I think they actually do feel, yes, our people are our resource, and the better the people, the better the product. But then they look at it as a line item, oh, well, I don't know. And so they kind of get caught up. But I think, helping the organization even see that culture shift of this is the dollar that you spend that will have the largest impact because it touches everybody is a huge, huge thing. Now, to do that though, we're all talking about kind of ROI performance. How, and you've got 35, 36 years of experience of this. To you, when you're looking at a training or development program, how are you defining performance? Like, what does performance mean?
Yeah. So for me, performance, and I think um, we could, most everyone would agree that performance is really about how effectively can a person, a system, a process, but how effectively can a person accomplish a specific goal or task,
Hmm.
a business outcome? And that's measured to certain standards, such as speed, accuracy, efficiency, quality, whatever, the business is really looking for. Um, what I think is interesting is that oftentimes, and I think learning has been accused of this, learning has probably earned this through the years as well in a lot of cases. Oftentimes learning forgets that we're in the performance business and not in the learning business. If you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it starts with what's the business outcome that we're trying to achieve? Like what's
Hmm.
the business strategy?
Hmm.
What's the goal? What is the outcome? What's the problem the business is trying to solve? And if we're not shooting at that target and we're looking at learning, I mean, hey, learning's awesome. Like we should
Yeah.
all be learners, always learning, but you may miss the target. And when you're talking about investing and finding a return on investment and you're talking about performance that counts in the organization, you're talking about performance that's on target to a particular business strategy or a business goal.
Yeah. And, I've kind of made an analogy like when you give directions, right? It's like, well, if you don't know where you're going, how do you know the best way to get there?
Yeah.
And if you broadly say, meet me in Chicago, I'll land in Chicago, right? It's going to still take me maybe 30, 40 minutes to actually find where you are once I've made it to Chicago. Um, but if I know to meet you at Wrigley Field, I've got a much better shot of hitting that goal that I'm trying to do. And I think a lot of times is what we do is we like create this, we know we need to go to Chicago and that's it. And then we kind of collect performance along the way. Like after we went to Chicago, we're like, okay, now we got there. Now, how close did we get? How much time did it take versus like really understanding what is it that we set out to do here in the first place? And I think that I was talking to a gentleman a couple months back, and I think that's really uh, one of the big ways that L&D can stand to have a big transformation is for those people to lead that charge to say, I'm not gonna do this program if I don't have an idea of what the impact's gonna be.
Fully agree. And we're not aligned on what that target is and
Yeah.
how you're going to measure that. And sometimes I think we make measurement so much harder on ourselves than we need to. And I've gotten to work with some really awesome measurement gurus and evaluation gurus in the learning and development space and performance space. Quite honestly, if you can use the same metrics that the business uses, all the better. The
Yeah.
more you can speak in the language of the business, if use your analogy, if we're both talking about going to Chicago, very first thing we better do is figure out what's the shortest route from here to Chicago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or actually, see, I think that's actually where the nuance lies, because what what are you hoping to get out of that route? If it's a sightseeing tour, the exact opposite,
Yeah,
actually.
fair.
And
Yeah.
I I reference this a lot. We were doing a call center training for a large telecom provider, and we had asked them, what is the performance you want to see? And they're like, well, we just want them to get better. And we're like, well, listen, getting better in a call center environment means a lot of things. Are you like let's use like a Nordstrom or a Zappos where they will spend 5 hours on the phone with you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they will listen to your life story and they will share their story because they just want you to leave that feeling heard, feeling understood,
Yeah.
versus maybe a internet service provider, right? They just want you to get off the phone.
Yeah.
They want you to solve it and get to the next one
Yeah.
and get to the next one. So for one organization, talk time is not really important.
Right.
For others, talk time becomes the important thing. So how are you supposed to create a training program that says, well,
Yeah.
either get them off the phone or keep them on the phone, like develop rapport, make them feel
Yeah.
special, or answer their question, but keep them moving. So that like the overall purpose is so key.
Yeah, it really is. And that goes back to the core of business strategy. Is
Mhm.
there business strategy cost? Is it quality? Is it, you know, pricing, well, it's cost, but time, so it really does go back to where are they leaning heavy on business, what they think their business value is.
And how do you interject yourself in that conversation? I'm sure you've had many times where you've tried and failed, many times though that I'm sure you've succeeded. Like, what have you found to be most successful?
I honestly think business leaders. So when I started at Merck in the commercial organization, and then I moved to the manufacturing organization where I led manufacturing learning. And I'll never forget, like I felt like I was in some ways a whole different company almost, like the
Okay.
world was different. And what I appreciated was truly what I really saw was that business leaders, if you can solve a really important business problem for me,
Hmm.
I'm on board. Like you
Yeah.
are welcome.
True.
If you're going to waste my time,
True. True.
I have a lot of problems to solve in a given.
Yeah. Yeah.
So honestly, I really think being part of the solution and being able to show up credibly to understand the business, to understand the problem they're looking to solve. And if it was a problem that I couldn't help them solve, getting out of the way. If it's a problem I could help them solve, being really clear about how we could solve that together.
Mm.
And with that, I don't think you have a problem getting us, the
Yeah.
proverbial
Yeah.
seat at the
Seat at the
table.
table.
I really don't, because I think business leaders want to succeed and they want their people to succeed. So if you can help me do that, come on board. Um, and I really think that the challenge most L&D folks have is they try to come with learning solutions before they understand the business problem.
Right.
Really listening, and they're not doing what you and I are talking about, which is really understanding what are you trying to achieve. Is it that you're trying to achieve, you know such a reputation for customer experience
Right.
that you really want to make sure you're spending time and
Oh,
and having a conversation with the customer on the phone, or actually, are you really not that interested in customer experience? You want to solve the problem and you want to solve as many problems in a day as you can. Like, so I think that really does become the key.
totally agree. But what you're saying, Teresa, makes a lot of sense. Of uh, if the business values you, everything else is salt. Like just be valuable for the business, be valuable to the person. But something you said was really interesting, and I don't know if we've covered it. Like I don't think I've heard somebody mention before. What happens if you know you can't add value, right? If you're like, listen, this person's telling me that they want this done. I actually don't think that I'm the person to solve that problem. Is there like an example that springs to mind or something where you're like, you know what? I just had to tell them I don't think we're the best company to solve or best, the person to help you there. Because I feel like that's a tough thing to do when somebody reaches out for help.
Yeah, it's really funny. Not thinking of a specific example, but I know we did it a lot. Um, and I say a lot. because there are requests. Our portfolio was huge, and
Hmm.
there are requests that come in all the time. And sometimes things are just better served in a different way.
Yeah.
And walking your client through, I can help you. I could build the program you're asking me to build. It's going to cost X amount of money,
Yeah.
and you're not going to get any incremental value other than if you did blank. And
Right.
here's why. Or I think more times that I did that was when, frankly, their organization wasn't ready for it. I
Mm.
can do that, but your process is lagging and your process isn't up and running yet. So if
Yeah.
I train folks, I'm just going to have to redo it because then you're going to fix your process and I'm going to have to go back in and
Do it.
redo the training. So why don't we step back to root cause
Yeah.
and sequence this? So sometimes it's a sequencing issue
Good
where
point.
the culture might not be there. It might be there's a whole lot of, and this is, again, one of my sort of pet conversations right now. You know, a lot of folks are really honing in on, well, gosh, you don't really need learning and development. You got AI because, you can get content from anywhere. But but AI is not going to tell you, you know what? The challenge you have right now is actually a cultural challenge. It's not a content challenge. So you can learn
Yeah.
all that stuff. You can do 10, 20 programs. You're not going to get any benefit from that because your issue is a little more deep seated than that. So sometimes it just takes really working through what's the sequence and what is the underlying root cause of a challenge or what's going to get in the way of success. And I think people can hear that because they
Yeah.
don't want to spend or waste dollars and waste the time of their people. When you think about taking front a manufacturing shop floor operator offline, how much money that costs you. Or you think
Hmm.
about taking a sales representative out of the field, or even more so, think about taking a researcher off the bench, right?
Yeah.
That costs a lot of money. So you better have an effective value add. And I think if you could talk in those kinds of terms, like, yeah, I can do what you're asking, but it's not really going to buy you anything.
Yeah. And I think that's a good insight for any profession, honestly, because in marketing, the big kind of hang up or thing is like, oh, marketing just does all these leads and does all these people, but they don't know what the leads suck. They don't have an actual understanding of sales, and so they're just kind of out there doing it. They're not adding a lot of value. They're just creating value for themselves. Um, Understanding and being real with the fact of what actual value do I stand to bring this person or this org is really big. And if there's not the value for the person and for the org, and if you can't really say how you're going to help there, then
Hmm.
the reality is you probably aren't going to. Like I think I might have referenced this one time. We had a client who put out a bid. It was a client of ours for 10 hours of overview of brand awareness training for the company. They're just like, oh, we really want to build out the best in class training program that talks about our company and why we exist. And it digs into each of these service lines and all these things. And then like at the end of the day, what we said is, listen, they ended up canceling the project but we knew ahead of time because we said nobody has 10 hours to learn about the company. That's just not that's not where a head of sales or a head of customer service or a head of marketing, nobody's going to say, yes, take a day and a half of my people's time to just make them more interested in our company. Um, but they wanted it so bad because they wanted this great training program and super high cost and visual. And so yeah, like sometimes, and I have to, I'm
Yep.
saying this as if I haven't done this as well. Sometimes my ego has gotten the best of me because I wanted to create a best in class program without actually thinking, is this really what our company needs right now?
You are reminding me, you just, triggered an example in my head. And if one of my former team members hears this podcast, we'll get a chuckle. There was a program that it was a heavily scientific program and it was a pet passion of this extremely brilliant person to have others learn this particular technique and
Hmm.
process. And it was not a small program. It was something like 6 or so modules long. The challenge was there were probably only 2 or 3 other people in the entire organization that would ever need to learn this. And the person traveled a lot and was in demand. As an SME, we could never get with her. It
Right.
was like going on 2 years.
Oh
And we had one module completed. And we need to like just call it like this one's dead on the table. Like we
my.
need to just say no. And there was the client was really, this is critical. I'm sure it is, but I think this person is going to learn more by doing alongside you
Yeah.
than taking 6 modules. And that's a really good example of where ROI is just not going to pan out. Um, and so we did have that quite a bit because you have people that are really super excited about the work
Right.
that they're doing
Right.
and they just want to share it with others and they're confident that everybody else wants to have the same skill
Same
set
thing
that
that they
they
do.
have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where probably my mantra always was, who's the sponsor? Are you talking to the right sponsor? Are you here in the middle of the organization or are you talking high enough in the organization that that sponsor really cares that this
Yeah.
training
Yeah.
happens for 3 people in the organization? If that sponsor tells me it's a big deal, okay. But if this sponsor's telling me
Yeah.
it's a big
You,
deal,
it's funny. So for those right now, it seems to be right now a big focus of a lot of what webinars I'm being asked to talk about and podcasts and stuff. I'm speaking at is how do you work with vendors like us? I think that's kind of I think people are a little bit more tuned to. And this is just a PSA, right? A public service announcement that if you don't have a really good connect with the end stakeholder and then you bring in another vendor into
oh,
it, the distance between what the person needs and what gets developed is so far unless you put those two people together. So just to, like you mentioned, yeah, if you as L&D are kind of far removed from the actual person that needs to get the thing done and you're not really sure, is this going to be delivered well? And then you don't expose one other person down the street. And I mean, this could be either L&D, this could be externally or internally, right? Maybe you just pass this over to an ID and you're like, oh, I barely understand it, but good luck. So yeah, the closer you can get, the better. And just a PSA, if you're working with a vendor, you have to bring them directly with you, or now you're even further from the problem.
it's really true. Nolan, my team, my last team. So I had many years where I was client facing and I was the one that was interacting with the business. My last role, we spanned the enterprise and we worked with all of the teams that were client facing. And it's a very similar situation to the one that you're describing. If the performance consultant didn't bring my team member into the conversation and is trying to translate everything they said, yes, they have to own the business relationship. Yes, they have to be the one that sort of
Right.
qualifies the business. Is this worth us, spending time bringing somebody from my team in? But once you decide that it is, you really need to have that first-hand conversation because the person who's designing really has to understand, what are you driving after? Where are the
Yeah.
likely gaps? Where's the capability challenge going to come in? And oftentimes, you know, we had some challenge, I think, as you like trying to go through a little bit too much whisper down the lane.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, so one of the topics you touched on, and the last topic that I want to touch on today, because you have to talk about AI, or else you legally can't post a podcast. Um, how One of the things you said earlier, I believe, was when you're leveraging AI, actually the human element becomes even more important because we've gotten so caught up in do this widget or do this thing, but the ability to direct what actually needs to get done and an assessment of that impact requires a human. I believe that's what you had. Am I? referencing that, so we've got like that is I believe a very real example. And that way, in what other ways are you seeing AI change performance, or maybe not change performance, but like make us reevaluate our role in that, or maybe even how is AI helping us do that better?
Yeah. So I think there's both sides of the coin, right? I think there are ways that AI definitely has things to bring to the table that are a help. And I also think that there are limitations. And so I guess, where I land is that I believe that the future isn't AI versus humans. So,
Right.
there's a lot of conversation about, oh, well, with AI, we don't need as big a learning team. We can,
Hmm.
because content's everywhere. Again, you're not going to win the Olympics by reading a book about your sport, right? That's great. Sounds good, um, but it's AI with humans, and so I think that to thrive in the future, we have to understand what does the human element bring and what does AI bring, and then start to
Totally.
really work together because there's things that AI simply cannot replicate. So, for example, um, empathy and emotional intelligence. Let's start there,
Yeah.
right? Humans can listen. Humans can relate, they can respond to emotion, they can tell what's really important to a business leader, what's not as important to a business leader. They understand whether in a one-on-one coaching session or if they're navigating a tense team conflict, they understand, they can see and gain insight
Hmm.
that AI can't. It can maybe simulate an emotional
Yeah,
response,
it can.
but it
Yeah.
doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Empathy is really essential in learning and development, like really being able to design for that inclusivity so that somebody
Yep.
feels that it's really
They
supporting
belong.
behavior change. It's really creating some good psychologically safe environment to try, to fail, etc. That's all super important. AI doesn't understand that. So that's
Yeah,
what,
and you mentioned, because you're like, oh, well, it doesn't have empathy. Well, it does have empathy, but it's synthetic empathy, right? Which is probably more than I have, even trying. My empathy is also some synthetic because I don't. It's not a trait that I. I think it's a skill that I don't have, because my wife has it
yeah,
100%. I've got zero. So it's also synthetic for me,
yeah,
but even then you can tell, and there's something to this idea. I think
yeah,
I'm sure somebody's written some articles on this, but we have a person in our company that leverages AI a ton
yeah.
and constantly sends things and says, read this, read this, respond to this, read this, respond to this, read this, respond to this. And I find myself saying, well, you invested 30 seconds of your time to write this, which is going to take an hour of my time to read and respond. Now, if you're not willing to invest the time to dig deep enough into the issue, how am I supposed to invest all of my time? So like this idea, because it used to be, for me to create something like that, I knew it took time, it took an
Yeah.
investment. But if it didn't take time or investment, but now I'm seeking everybody else's time and investment, to me, that equation, I'm not equaling both sides there. And so you mentioned, the empathy part. Yes, my leadership AI coach, which we have, it has empathy, but
Hmm.
I know it doesn't have empathy. Like I know it's not invested in me at a
Yeah,
very human level.
yeah.
Really astute kind of point.
Yeah, and then you also raise like so you from your conversation comments, you can also go to creativity,
Yeah.
right? So AI can pull from things in the past, but it can remix, it can
Hmm.
serve it up differently, but it can't really it doesn't have a human experience. So creativity
Yeah.
really comes from the human experience, right? So,
Yeah.
connecting ideas
True.
that are separate or drawing on culture or understanding risk taking or storytelling, those are all things that AI can't do, but humans can imagine futures. You want your learning professional to be imagining a different future and thinking about what is it going to take to get us to that future and thinking very creatively about what needs to be different for us to be able to reach that, which is something we haven't reached yet.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
train AI to do that.
Right. Yeah. And I think I think so, like, like we talked about, the psychological element, some of the human element, but I still think, a lot of times, and I was frustrated. I was creating a demo of we have a AI coach that can talk,
Mm,
goes back and forth.
yep.
And I was doing a demo and I was so frustrated because it kept answering, there's 5 things that you can do to like do it. And I was like, all right, like get through the 5th one, but like then tell me which one to do, like,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I think part of I think what AI can do a really good job, and I want to, I feel like I'm an AI kind of basher at this point. Theresa and I are not part of some
No.
AI militia. We actually both really like using AI. So we're not saying don't use it. Please do use it. I speak about using it. So do use it. Um, but I think what AI does really well is it gives you the options. You then have to select which of those options that you need to go with. You still need, and that's where I feel the human plus AI is the
Yeah.
big thing. It's
Yeah.
let it help me create the options, because a lot of times I get stuck, or I don't really know, or so give me 5 or 6 ideas that maybe I can like pull from, but my me choosing the option is why the company pays me,
Yeah.
right? It's that proverbial like, oh, I paid a mechanic $300 an hour, or the best is this locksmith. Locksmith comes in. This is a real life story. Um, I get locked out of my house. Locksmith comes over. He's like, but he drives like 45 minutes. It takes like 45 minutes for him to get there. I'm like, whatever. He's like, oh, I'm out and whatever. Comes over, takes a look at my lock, and he starts, oh, well, this is a very, very hard. And I'm like, all right, buddy, like, I get it. Just tell me what you're going to charge, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, it's going to cost $250. And like in my mind, that mantra went like, okay, it's going to take him a second to do it, but it took him 20 years to understand how to do it in 1 second.
Yeah.
That is very real. It absolutely is real. And I have found, even in the past year, the more that we devalue that 20 years, that actually we get ourselves in a lot of trouble. Um, I ended up telling this locksmith, I've got a $50 bill in my pocket. You take it or you leave it. I'll call someone else. It literally took him 10 seconds. He put
Wow.
something in there, does a tap, opens it up, takes the $50 and walks out. But anyway,
Amazing.
but yeah, there is that 20 years of experience is incredibly valuable, and we can't really lose that.
Well, and you're speaking to sort of the complex judgment piece, right? That's
Right.
a human
Yeah.
skill, the problem solving and complex judgment. And AI can do sort of routine
Yeah. Yeah.
tasks and cognitive tasks. It's great at data analytics. It's great at summarizing. It's, I mean, amazing at sort of pulling in and coalescing quickly. It's that judgment piece that you're speaking to that's so critical. That is, it takes time and human cognition to really drive that kind of complexity and thinking. And I agree with you. AI is an incredible tool. We
Yeah.
could use it in learning for personalized learning pathways,
Oh yeah.
adaptive capability, analytics, content creation. You heard me talk earlier about accelerating performance. To me, it can accelerate the performance of our learning and development professionals.
Totally.
So, I mean, can I tell you, there was never a year that I've worked in the 36 years that I was able to say yes to everything that came in the door. It was always about prioritization. It was
Yeah.
always about the right critical few, etc. Well, with the quick turn that we talked about in reskilling and upskilling, you're going to have to get to more and more. What
Yeah.
I love about AI is that it gives the L&D a fighting chance, if you will, of
Yeah.
being able to move as rapidly as they need to move, because some of that more routine I can leave to the AI. It can start my scripts for me. It can start you may want to have this kind of an outline in
Yeah.
your
Yeah. Yeah.
module.
Your
But
content
then,
outline, your
yeah.
storyboard, it can give me a starting chance.
Yeah. And then all I need to do is say, okay, yeah, but that won't work because of this cultural context,
Yeah.
or because of this challenge that the organization is facing right now, or yeah, that's good, but I'd say it a different way, or but it does cut the developer's time, the designer's time down, but
Yeah.
you still need that critical judgment. So I really have a challenge when I hear we'll be able to save dollars.
Yeah.
Um, I think what you'll be able to do is accomplish more faster.
Yep. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think
That makes sense, but you
what what
but you
what
kind of have to now.
what I say is keep keep your budget the same, but do more.
Yes.
If somebody says you can save money, say, listen, do you want to be spending less money on improving the performance of our people? It's a very hard thing to say yes to, right? It's like, no, that's not true. Okay, well, what I'll do, I will cut the cost and time of my content development down by 50%, right? We're seeing that's about what we can do.
Yep.
Now you take that money and you invest it into in-person events or these things that people really want
Yeah.
and really have a
Yeah.
solid impact that in the past, and that's why like AI helps you do things you could never do, but sometimes it does so by freeing up your resources to do it. So you really have to look at it that way versus just a pure let me save some money here.
I agree. It's a value creation tool in a very different way
Yeah.
because I can take some of the things that have to be done, and this is no disrespect to compliance training programs
Right.
or functional training
Yeah.
programs and all those things. They have to be done. They take a lot of time. They always are the ones that take the majority of your portfolio because
Yeah.
they are critical to driving the business. They're
Hmm.
your hygiene, right? Like it has to be done. But then all the other stuff that's going to add tremendous value to the business, you're trying to free up resources to get to. You can get there now, and do it in a much more effective way. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. It's really about, I think sometimes we always spend time talking about cost in around learning
Yeah.
and development instead of value.
Yeah.
Where can
Yeah.
you really create value?
Well, what a way to end. How to create, starting with performance, ending with value. Lovely, Theresa. Thank you for investing so much of your time with us, dealing with my slight camera issue in the middle of the way. Thank you so much. This has been a blast. Really, really excited to hear the comments and feedback on this episode. Thank you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for the great dialogue. Really, yeah, get me to geek out on this stuff. So really,
Awesome.
really enjoyed it, Nolan.
Awesome. Thanks. See you later, Teresa.
Bye bye.
Bye.